Welcome back. Video 2 of Module 2, Writing the Speech of Self-Introduction. In the previous video, we overviewed how to write the speech of self-introduction in terms of just the basic layout, and we looked at some different sample speeches. And in this one, I want to specifically focus on how to come up with your central idea. So again, the central idea is another word for like a thesis. So I could explain, but the long and short of it is that typically a thesis is argumentative, and there's only one right answer to a thesis because there's an antithesis to a thesis. The central idea statement, it's not really about what's true or false, because if you think about something like a speech of self-introduction, there are so many things about you that you could talk about. So your central idea is just you're choosing one of millions of things you could talk about, and you're going to talk about that. It's not whether or not it's true or false. It's just, for this particular speech, this is what I'm going to focus on. But you only get one. So it's really important, especially for shorter speeches, like 3 minutes, that you stick to one central idea. So how do you come up with your central idea? Well, a lot of people want to choose topics. So whenever someone asks about the speech of self-introduction, their first instinct is like, oh, what topic should I talk about? Should I talk about a hobby or where I live or how I grew up or my major? No, you shouldn't talk about any of that stuff yet, because that's all topics. That's all facts about you. But people do not want speeches about facts, okay? They want speeches about ideas. And I didn't assign it this semester, but you're certainly welcome to watch it. There is a great TED Talk. Chris Anderson. It's not very long. It's like 10 minutes. All right. So there's a great little video, Chris Anderson, Secrets to Great Public Speaking. And it's, it's 7 minutes. It's awesome. And Anderson sort of has this thing where he talks about, well, actually, you know what? I just play it. I'm not going to play the whole thing. I'm going to play 2 minutes of it because I really think it sums it up better than I can sum it up. Well, not better, but he already did it, so why not just take advantage, huh?
Everything in life is a negotiation. When you cross the street is a negotiation. Getting your coffee at Starbucks.
All right. Everything is not a negotiation for the record, but whatever.
Some people think that there's a TED Talk formula. Give a talk on a round red rug, share a childhood story, divulge a personal secret, end with an inspiring call to action. No, that's not how to think of a TED Talk. In fact, if you overuse those devices, you're just going to come across as cliched or emotionally manipulative. But there is one thing that all great TED Talks have in common, and I would like to share that thing with you. Because over the past 12 years, I've had a ringside seat listening to many hundreds of amazing TED speakers like these. I've helped them prepare their talks for prime time and learn directly from them. They're completely different. The task as a speaker is to transfer into your listeners' minds an extraordinary gift, a strange and beautiful object that we call an idea. Let me show you what I mean. Here's Haley. She is about to give a TED Talk, and frankly, she's terrified. 1,200 people, many of whom have never seen each other before, are finding that their brains are starting to sync with Haley's brain and with each other. They're literally beginning to exhibit the same brainwave patterns. And I don't just mean that they're feeling the same emotions. There's something even more startling happening. Let's take a look inside Haley's brain for a moment. There are billions of interconnected neurons in an impossible tangle. But look, here, right here, a few million of them are linked to each other in a way which represents a single idea. And incredibly, this exact pattern is being recreated in real time inside the minds of everyone listening. That's right. In just a few minutes, a pattern involving millions of neurons is being teleported into 1,200 minds just by people listening to a voice and watching a face. But wait, what is an idea anyway? Well, you can think of it as a pattern of information that helps you understand and navigate the world. Ideas come in all shapes and sizes, from the complex and analytical to the simple and aesthetic. And here are just a few examples shared from the TED stage. Sir Ken Robinson, creativity.
So we won't watch these because most of them are stupid. Because a lot of these TED ideas are not. All right, so that's all I wanted to point out. So that's what an idea is. And your job, your number one task as a public speaker, is to transfer into your audience's mind this idea. And my job is to teach you how to do that. So when we talk about a central idea statement for your speech, we're talking about the idea behind you. So when someone sees your face, what's the idea that you represent? And you have to remember too that audiences really can only process one idea at a time. So if you think about, for example, for you, whenever you're taking a class, if a single unit or a single lecture or a single test covers 15, 16, 17, 18, 20, 50 ideas, the more ideas there are, the harder they all are to process. So we focus on one idea per speech. And so in this case, you have to pick one idea about you. And an idea for me, a central idea statement is a single sentence. It has a verb. It's an active sentence. So an idea is not, so if we think of the Nell Casey from the previous video, let's scroll back to the Nell Casey example. I think it's on page maybe like 12. 12. Yeah. So if we scroll back to Nell Casey here, we can see that the idea of this particular speech is stuck front and center at the end of the introduction, right where it should be. My formative years spent in an unkempt house with an emotionally messy family have led me to a hyper neatness, a gone too far impulse to fight childhood chaos. That whole sentence is the idea. Right? The ideal is that I have a hyper neat personality. I'm obsessed with neatness because I think that my obsession with neatness is going to allow me to control the chaos that I can't control everywhere else. That's the idea. The theme is hyper neatness. So this one phrase, hyper neatness, I think of it as like my lighthouse. This adjective, hyper neatness, or I guess it's a noun, hyper neat would be the adjective. I think of this as the theme. So we want to make sure that that theme is showing up throughout the speech, because if you start with hyper neatness as a theme, and then by the end your speech is about teamwork, you've changed themes midway through, which means you've also probably changed central ideas without knowing it. So you do need a single, concrete, solid, best ever sentence that is your central idea statement for your speech. But you also want to think about within that sentence, what's a nice, easy theme like hyper neatness that you could use just to try to reiterate throughout the speech. And so if we look over at the sample speech from Marissa. Oh, I already have it up. I don't know why I did that. If we look at Marissa's self-introduction outline, Marissa's speech is, I am a high self-monitor. I work hard to connect with people, but in doing so, I also overthink things, right? So there's the one idea. Notice it doesn't have the word and in it. It's a single solidified idea. High self-monitoring means working hard to connect with other people, thinking a lot about how you're connecting with people, but also that means overthinking and sometimes not being able to relax. So those are all connected in one idea. And then, of course, the theme or the adjective we might pull off for this is self-monitor, or maybe overthinking. So then we have this theme that we can use throughout the speech to make sure that we're staying on the same theme as we move through the speech. All right. So how do you do that? Or how do you come up with your own really great theme for a speech of self-introduction? Well, before we talk about that, I want to go to page, I think it's 40 of your course pack. Nope. Okay, here we go. Page 39 of your course pack. It's a little activity. I didn't assign it as homework, but I think it's helpful. So as we look through these themes, rank them based on best to worst, all right? And there is a list of criteria in your course pack, but don't worry about that for now. Just use your instincts, right? So rank these central idea statements from best to worst. So if you look at them, here you got 6, right? I am who I am because of the things I've overcome from my past. I get frustrated that I often overlook the present, but it also frees me up to fantasize about future possibilities. How can a campaigner personality change the world with just an idea, you may ask? Well, I'll tell you. I hope that my hardworking, optimistic, and supportive nature will make me a successful physician's assistant. I fantasize about future possibilities, but this tendency to look beyond the present can be disappointing. A campaigner with a little spark of madness. All right, so go through now and just take a second and rank those from 1 meaning the best to 6 meaning the worst. So 1 is the best and 6 is the worst. And don't worry about being too precise. If you just want to write good and bad, that's fine by me, right? But use your instincts. Like which one of these sentences do you want to hear more about? So if you had to pick one and you're like, I'm going to go to this speaker's talk and there are 6 talks, which speaker would you choose? And you can pause the video if you need more time, but I'm just going to give you like 10 seconds to maybe do it quickly. And if you want to pause the video, you can always come back. Now, hopefully what you did is you chose, first of all, you should know that the non-sentences should be the weak ones. So a campaigner with a little spark of madness, it's interesting, but there isn't like a fully fledged idea there. So it makes this person seem like a little lazy, a little gimmicky. So they're going to be pretty low on my list. Also, how can a campaigner personality change the world? Well, I'll tell you. That's also gimmicky and intriguing. So while I want to maybe know more about that, there's no idea there, right? They didn't explain it. So I'm fine with you asking questions in the speech, but this question needs to be answered. The central idea is the answer to this question, right? How can a campaigner personality change the world? And also, is this about you, the person who wrote the speech, or is this about a personality type? Because I don't want to hear an informative speech about a personality type. So those two are pretty weak. Then we look at this one. This one's interesting. I am who I am because of the things I've overcome from my past. Now that may at first seem pretty good, but it's not telling you anything. All of us are who we are because of our past. So this is a really generic, sort of non-insightful statement that's really avoiding the hard work of coming up with a point to say about yourself. Then this one, I hope that my hardworking, optimistic, and supportive nature will make me a successful physician's assistant. So there's a couple things wrong with this one. First of all, it's got a list of 3 different themes rather than just one concrete theme. So they could have picked hardworking or optimistic or supportive. Also, there's kind of this like desperate feeling, like give me this job, and you don't want to have that desperate vibe. You really don't want to have it in a cover letter, but even if you're going to have it in a cover letter because you're applying for a job, you really don't want to have it in a speech. And then, of course, the biggest problem with this is that I don't really get a sense of who this person is in their complete wholeness, right? I get what they think they are. They want to show all their perfect side, right? Oh, I'm so hardworking and I'm so supportive, but there's no downside, right? What's the downside to being really supportive? Like, is this a person who doesn't know how to put themselves first? Is this a person who wants to take care of others because they don't think they're worth taking care of, right? Where's that extra layer of nuance and insightfulness, that double-edged sword, that paradox? And then we're left then with these 2 sentences, which are really just different variations on each other. And these are really good sentences because they're very concrete. They talk about this person's personality. They have a little bit of strength and a little bit of weakness. They're complex, and they don't apply to any specific domain. So they're not about work or not about romantic relationships, friendships, school, hobbies. They're about how they do all of the parts of their life. So they're very specific and unique to the person, but they're also generalizable to all the person's behaviors. So I'm frustrated that I'm not paying attention in the present, but in doing so, I also get to fantasize about future possibilities. So whether you prefer this one or whether you prefer this one, it's just a matter of whether you like to start with the negative and then flip to the positive, or start with the positive and flip to the negative. And that's just a matter of personal preference. I think they're both fine. So now that we've talked about some of the strengths and weaknesses of a central idea statement, what I recommend is using the Self-Introduction Invention Guide, which is on page 40 of your course pack. And you're going to start by taking the 16 personalities test. And a lot of people are like, well, do I have to take that test? I don't care what test you take, but I know this one has really good information that you can use as a springboard. So if you want to take another test, that's fine, but it might not yield you the same results. And you want to come up with your personality. And so what you're looking for is 3 compelling or interesting sentences from your personality description. And you're looking especially for any of these double binds, right? Any of these greatest strength is your greatest weakness sentences with which you identify, particularly those that surprise you. So especially if you come up with something from these personality tests, these strengths and weaknesses that you haven't thought about before, those are really good sentences. You're also looking for sentences that elicit the response, I never thought about it that way, but that's totally exactly how I behave, right? So then what you're going to do is you're going to take the sentences from the test and you're going to put the original sentence down, and then you're going to rewrite the sentence. So I'm going to go ahead and take us over to the personality test. I already know my 16 personalities, so I'm just going to go to the results. You can certainly take the test if you want to. And then I'm going to pick my personality type. And I don't care about this ENFJP stuff. That stuff doesn't matter to me. All right. This is just, again, all this is a brainstorm. All this is a way to come up with an idea. So in rhetoric, we call this invention, right? It's a strategy of discovering things to say. There's a million ways you could discover something to say for a speech of self-introduction. You could look at your most recent podcasts or books that you've read and thought about why they were interesting to you. You could ask a friend, what if people had to know one thing about you, what would they know? All of those are different strategies. I just like this one the best. But you can, there's millions of these strategies out there. So for me, you can read about strengths and weaknesses, romantic, you can read all this stuff, but you're really looking for that sentence. And I remember the first time I took this test, one of the sentences that really stood out to me as a campaigner is, here we go. Campaigners constantly explore new ideas and improvements, fantasize about future possibilities. In dating, this tendency to look at potential rather than the present can be self-defeating. All right. So that's a great sentence. It's a double-edged sword. It talks about a strength and a weakness. I really like the way that it's written, and it's something that I didn't really think about in those terms until I took the test. And again, people have different degrees of self-awareness. So if you're not a super self-aware person, then a lot of this may surprise you. And if you're more self-aware, then you may have to give yourself some slack that there's not going to be anything super new to you in the personality test. So you're just going to have to pick your favorite sentences. So there's my original statement. Campaigners constantly explore new ideas and improvements, fantasize about future possibilities. In dating, this tendency to look at potential rather than the present can be self-defeating. Now, there are a couple of tweaks I want to make to this in my rewrite. First of all, I don't want to write about the campaigner personality type. If I were giving an informative speech about how the campaigner personality type worked, fine. But this is about me, so I want to write the sentence, I constantly explore new ideas and improvements. I don't like the word and, so I am always looking for new ideas, right? Fantasizing about future possibilities. And of course, fantasizing about future possibilities and looking for new ideas are the same thing. So I am always fantasizing about future possibilities. All right, I don't need to write in dating because I'm not going to write my whole speech about dating. Maybe one example could be about dating, or maybe I don't want to talk about dating at all, but I'm certainly not going to make the central idea of my speech about how I date any more than I would want you to make the central idea about your speech about what you're like at work, right? We want it to be not domain specific. So I am always fantasizing about future possibilities, but this tendency to look at potential rather than the present can be self-defeating. Great. Now I have an awesome sentence, right? It's got a little bit of positive. I'm all about the future, all about the next big thing. But because of that, I get a little defeated because I'm never like appreciating what's in front of me. All right. And then the theme that comes out of this might be like I'm a fantasizer, right? So I might even start to think about like ways I could describe myself. I am a big idea person, right? I fantasize about future possibilities, but looking at potential instead of the present can be self-defeating, right? However I want to play around with that. But really, just get an idea that you like. We can work the wording later. One of the things that we'll learn about public speaking this semester is when you're doing what we call extemporaneous public speaking, meaning when you're delivering a speech that you've written and prepared in advance, but you're delivering it in the moment as live speech, you don't need to worry so much about the wording. I just want to get the general idea. Like, I'm all about the big idea. I'm all about fantasizing about what comes next, but I don't always appreciate what's happening right in front of me, and that sucks. That'd be fine. It's close enough, right? You just want to get the idea. The idea is the most important thing. You don't need to micromanage all of your word choice. So just get something on paper that seems pretty good. Now do that 2 more times. And make sure that your next 2 sentences are very different. So don't do another one about fantasizing about future possibilities. Find a very different sentence. And maybe try not to find one, if the one in your personality test was about romance, maybe find it from another element of the test. And then find 3 of them. And then when you've got your 3, you want to choose your favorite. And so there's a little bit of, use the following questions to narrow your 3 ideas down to your one best idea. First of all, are you comfortable discussing this in front of strangers? Right? Because that's important. If you're like, I like this idea, but it's a little bit too revealing, don't choose that one. Is this an aspect of my personality that I want to explore? So are you interested in knowing more about your tendency to choose future fantasies over the present? Because if you don't want to know more about it, if you're like, no, that's not that interesting, who cares? Everybody's like that. If you're not interested, the audience isn't going to be interested. Could I coherently discuss this in under 3 minutes? Yes. If you've stuck to one idea, so in this case, like the idea that you like the big picture and you're always going for the next best thing and you don't always appreciate what you've got in the moment, that's probably enough. You can cover that in 3 minutes. But if you're talking about your hardworking, supportive, optimistic nature, can't cover that in 3 minutes because it's like 7 things. So really, the key here is to keep this very focused. Can you imagine different examples, basically? So do you have evidence of stuff to talk about? So can you think of stories where this has happened to you? Can you think of concrete, specific scenarios from work or dating or family life or whatever, where you have chosen these future fantasies and they have kind of screwed over the present moment? Can you think of a character from a TV show that also does this? Can you think of song lyrics, right? We're going to talk in the next video about how do you come up with all of this evidence that you need for the speech, but you have to be able to come up with that evidence. So if you're not able to really think about the kind of evidence, then maybe this is not a good pick for you. And then I also created evaluate your idea according to the criteria for interesting central idea statements. I also made you a little worksheet It is page 38. So it's called Criteria for Interesting Central Idea Statements. So does it fulfill the assignment description, right? Is it about you or is it about the campaign or personality type? So if the word I is not in your central idea, that's a bad sign. Is it narrow enough for the time limit? Is it written in a present tense verb, right? I don't want to hear about what you were like when you were 7. I want to hear about what's going on with you now. Is it written in active voice, right? Is it a complete assertive sentence, right? No questions, no fragments. Like, I don't want your central idea to be how my past influences my future. Number 1, it's not present focus. Number 2, it's missing a verb. And number 3, it's not specific to you. Can your central idea statement be understood without the rest of the speech? So if I say to you, hey, the thing you need to know about me is that I'm all about the future possibilities, and that means that I overlook the present a lot, you like get what that sentence means. You may want more information, but generally speaking, it can stand on its own. Is my central idea distinct from my evidence? I get people all the time giving me central ideas as like quotes, or I'm just like a jelly donut. I don't want any of that shit, okay? No metaphors, just tell me what the speech is about. What is the thing that you're trying to say? And I always tell people, if it helps, start with this phrase. If there's one thing people need to know about me, no matter who they are, where they meet me, if there's one thing people need to know about me, it's this. And then think about that phrase, my greatest strength is my greatest weakness, right? If there's one thing you need to know about me, it's that my greatest strength is being like a fantasizer, a big thinker, and my greatest weakness is that I take the present for granted. So always think about that greatest strength, greatest weakness, and if it helps, use the phrase, if there's one thing you need to know about me, it's this. And let that help get you started on these ideas. Is my idea unique, or does it sound all-purpose, like a job cover letter, like an opening to a Wikipedia article, a headline for the world's most boring newspaper, right? You want something that sounds very unique to you. It doesn't have to be mind-blowingly unique. I'm not the only person on the planet who's like obsessed with like the future possibility of things and doesn't always like enjoy the moment. Like lots of people are like that, but not everyone is like that. And so it's unique enough. And then there's also some advanced criteria. Once you've met the basic criteria, you can think about this. All right. And then for the speech of self-introduction in particular, will my audience think I'm interesting? Not likable, interesting. People don't have to like you at the end of this speech, right? Think about movies. You don't always like the main character, but you find them interesting. You want to know their story. You want to know how they tick, right? Because by learning more about them, you learn more about you. If we think about like the Joker. Joker's a good example. From my central idea, could the audience guess with some accuracy what I would be like as a sibling, a date, a classmate, a coworker, right? You can imagine from my central idea about future fantasizing, what I would be like as a teacher, what I would be like if we had to work on a team project together, what I would be like if I were your sister, what it would be like if we were dating, right? You can imagine all of those things, even if I don't specifically talk about them. And that's how you know you've got a really good central idea. So that is everything on how to come up with your central idea. You've got a lot of materials in the workbook. You've got the 16 personalities test to do. You've got that whole worksheet. So work through all of that. Come up with a central idea that you feel really good about. Put it in that self-introduction template. So once again, that central idea is going to go right here, right? I am a big thinker. I'm a big idea person. I fantasize about future possibilities, but that's often very frustrating in the present when I'm supposed to be working on things or something like that. Again, you don't need to wordsmith it to death. You just need to know what your idea is, and you need to be able to stay in the general ballpark so that every time you give the speech, yes, you may change the wording a little bit, but it's always generally the same idea. And once you've got this all done, you can go ahead, you can go file. When you're in the template, you can go file, make a copy, change this to speech of self-intro, and instead of template, change it to like, put your name in there, Lee Pierce. Leave it in the public speaking outline drafts folder. Don't move it, leave it there. Click OK. And now, make sure it's got a title. Right, so speech of self-intro, Lee Pierce. Make sure it's got a title. You can delete the instructions. You can clean it all up. And now you have your template in the folder for the self-introduction Google Drive folder. Right, so if we look in the folder now, you'll see that whereas before there was no file for me, now I've got a little file with my name on it. And so every time I want to work on this particular template, all I have to do is open up this particular document. Make sure you always are working in the same document, right? So there's Lee Pierce. We already have one from other people from the class have already started to work on theirs. That's great. So every time I want to make changes, I go into my speech of self intro template, my personal template, and I can keep updating and add it. So for now, let's get that central idea done, and then come back, watch video 3, which will teach you how to flesh out everything else that goes in this template. And while you're at it, if you haven't watched Marissa's sample speech or Jeffrey's sample speech or Viet's sample speech, go ahead and do that and get some ideas about different types of things people have talked about. Notice all the similarities. I mean, this is very formulaic. I have boiled this down into all of the parts that you need. And that doesn't make it less creative. What it does is it allows you to get rid of the easy stuff, like how to organize and introductions and all that stuff, so you can really focus on the hard part of the speech, which is coming up with what you want to talk about, your unique idea, and all of the evidence that you're going to use. So notice how, even though they're all following very similar templates, how different all the speeches are. Their personalities are different, the types of evidence that they use are different, their delivery is different. So watch those and get a little bit of inspiration. And then I will see you back here for video 3.